I never meant to make the coffee shop a routine, but it became one. Same table, near the window. Same chipped mug they always seemed to hand me. I didn't even like the place all that much. The espresso was too bitter, the chairs wobbled, and the radio played the same 4 songs on repeat. Still, I kept showing up, maybe because there's something reassuring about seeing the same people drift in and out every morning, the same barista fumbling change, the same hum of conversations you don't belong to. And her. She didn't belong here either, not really. She looked too put together for this place. Hair pulled back neatly, a clean wool coat draped over the back of her chair. Mid-40s, maybe? Always with a paperback in her hands. The kind of book that looked like it had been read a dozen times before. We weren't friends. Not exactly. But she remembered my order before the barista did, and sometimes, on quieter mornings, we'd nod at each other. Once, when my coffee came out wrong, she tilted her cup toward mine and said softly, "They get yours wrong too." I laughed more than I should have. That was 3 weeks ago, and the sound of it still sat somewhere in my chest. Today, she caught me glancing over at her book. "Same author as last week," I said before I could stop myself. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "You remember that?" I shrugged, folding the corner of my napkin until it was nothing but a soft ball in my palm. "I noticed things." She tilted her head a little, like she wanted to ask what else I noticed, but she didn't. Instead, she turned back to her book, though I saw her smile linger in the reflection of the window. I checked my phone under the table. No new messages. The last one on the screen was from my ex, 3 days old. "You still miss me?" I hadn't answered. I'd typed a dozen versions of the same thought and deleted every one. The closest I came was, "I don't miss you. I miss who you used to be." But I never hit send. I just stared at the unsent words like they were waiting for me to grow brave enough. Across from me, she shifted in her seat, tugging her sleeve down over her wrist. Her hands rested on the table, unpolished nails, faint lines at the knuckles. My eyes flicked there longer than they should have. She noticed. "You're quiet today," she said, not looking up from her page. I swallowed. "I usually am." That earned me a soft laugh. Not a cruel one, just the kind that made it clear she knew something I wasn't saying. The radio switched songs. The chair across from me creaked when someone brushed past. She closed her book, sliding the paperclip back onto the page. "Well," she said, standing. "Same time tomorrow?" It wasn't an invitation. Not really. But it wasn't nothing either. I nodded, trying not to look too eager. "Yeah. Same time." She slipped her coat on, adjusting the collar like she was buying herself another second before leaving. For the first time since I'd seen her, she looked like she wanted to say something more, but didn't. She just gave me a quiet look, one I wasn't sure how to read, and walked out into the cold. I sat there a long time after she left, thumb hovering over my phone screen, the words still unsent. When the bell above the door rang again, I looked up. It wasn't her, it was no one I knew. But for some reason, I checked my phone anyway. A new message blinked across the screen. Not from my ex. From her. The message was short, almost too short. "You left your scarf." I hadn't even noticed. It was draped over the back of my chair, forgotten in the corner when I rushed out after her. I typed back, "Keep it till tomorrow?" Then erased it. Wrote, "Thanks." Sent that instead. The next morning, the scarf was folded neatly on the table where I usually sat. And beside it, a second cup of tea. Not coffee, tea. She sat across from me, already reading. "I didn't know what you liked," she said, glancing at the cup. "So I guessed." I smiled faintly. "I've never been a tea person." "You could learn," she replied, as if it weren't about tea at all. I took a sip. Too sweet. I drank it anyway. We talked more that day. Not much, she wasn't the kind to spill herself out, but more than before. I learned she was divorced years ago. She said it without hesitation, like the fact itself was no longer raw. But the way her fingers traced the edge of her cup made me think the silence after was harder than the word itself. I wanted to ask questions, why it ended, if she was happy now, but I didn't. Instead, I told her about the first time I came to this cafe. How I had walked in after a fight with my ex, just needing a place where no one would expect me to explain myself. "And you stayed?" she asked. "I guess I like being invisible," I said. Her eyes softened at that, though she didn't comment. Just tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked out the window for a long moment. The air between us was steady, but charged. Like when you lean too close to a lamp and feel the buzz before the light. Every time she looked back at me, I felt it in my chest. I wondered what people saw when they noticed us. If the barista thought I was her son. Or worse, her student. The thought made my face warm, though she seemed unconcerned, almost careless about the glances around us. At one point, I bent to tie my shoe, and when I sat back up, she slid the scarf across the table. "You should keep it," she said. "It suits you more." I laughed quietly. "You mean I look like someone who forgets things?" "Maybe." Her eyes flicked down, then back to mine. "Or maybe you just need someone to remind you." The silence that followed was heavier than anything we'd said. I traced the rim of my cup, pretending it mattered. She rested her chin on her hand, and for a second, it felt like we weren't in a cafe at all but in some private room no one else could enter. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When we stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly. Just her fingertips, barely a second. Anyone watching would have missed it. But it was enough to leave me walking home with my heart beating far too fast, scarf heavy around my neck. It didn't take long for routine to become expectation. Same table, same hour. The scarf still looped at my neck some mornings, even when it was too warm for it. I think she noticed, but she never said anything. Then one day, she wasn't there. Her chair sat empty, book absent, table bare. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. Still, I stayed longer than usual, phone face up on the table. Every time the door opened, I looked. It was never her. When she did show up 2 days later, something was different. She smiled, yes, but it didn't quite reach. She sat down slower, folding her coat carefully over the back of the chair. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "Fine," she said. "Too quick." Silence pressed down between us. She stirred her tea long after the sugar had dissolved. I folded and unfolded my napkin. Finally, she said, "I might not be here as often. Work is shifting." "Shifting how?" She shook her head. "Just shifting." I nodded, though my chest tightened. I wanted to ask if that meant us, whatever us was. But I didn't. The next morning, I almost skipped the cafe altogether. But habit dragged me in, and so did the thought of maybe, just maybe, seeing her. This time, she was already there, book in hand, half-smile waiting like nothing had changed. Except it had. I felt it in the way she leaned back slightly, like she was giving herself distance. Halfway through my coffee, someone came in. A woman I vaguely knew, a friend of my ex. She spotted me instantly. Walked right over. "Hey," she said brightly, eyes flicking to the woman across from me. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah," I muttered. "Just here a lot." The friend looked between us, her smile tightening into something sharp. She didn't stay long, but long enough. Long enough for me to feel the heat of her curiosity burning holes in my back as she left. After that, neither of us spoke for a while. She closed her book. I stared at my cup. The air felt thick, heavy with the unspoken. "You're young," she said finally. Not an insult, just a fact. So, she echoed, eyes meeting mine. Then she looked away, jaw tightening. I wanted to say more. That age didn't matter. That I didn't care what people thought. That I only cared about her. But the words stuck, heavy, unformed. She stood to leave. I did too, almost on instinct. At the door, our shoulders brushed. She paused, just enough for me to feel it. My breath caught. Her hand lifted, as if she might touch my face, or maybe only the air near it. But then she pulled back, fingers curling into her sleeve. "Good night," she whispered. I walked home with that almost touch burning like it had happened, even though it hadn't. It happened on a Thursday evening, not in the cafe but outside, on the street where the lights hummed and the air smelled faintly of rain. I'd just come back from class. She was unlocking her door across the hall, scarf tucked loosely around her shoulders. "You're late," she said, as if she'd been waiting. I laughed, though I wasn't sure why. "Didn't know you kept track." She hesitated, then leaned against her doorframe. For the first time, she didn't look polished. Stray hair fell loose, her bag hung heavy on her arm. She looked tired. Human in a way I hadn't seen before. "Walk?" she asked. We ended up on a bench a few blocks down, just outside the small park where the lamps left more shadows than light. We didn't say much. Just sat, shoulders angled close but not touching. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Leaving? Moving somewhere no one knows you. Starting over." I thought about my ex. About the unanswered texts still sitting in my drafts. About how invisible I had tried to be when I first walked into that cafe. "Yeah," I said. "More than I should." She nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "I almost did. After the divorce. Packed everything into my car one night. Sat there for an hour. Couldn't turn the key." Something in her voice cracked then, so faint I might have imagined it. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What stopped you?" "My son," she said quietly. "He was asleep upstairs. 10 years old. I couldn't do it to him." Her son. The words landed heavier than she meant them to. It explained the lines of worry, the way she carried herself. It also explained why this, whatever this was, felt dangerous. I stared at the dark park ahead. My chest ached with words I couldn't say. That I wasn't a kid. That I wanted her to see me the way I saw her. That I thought about her more than was reasonable. Instead, I muttered, "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I," she admitted. Our eyes met then, holding longer than either of us intended. Something shifted in the air, quiet, electric. Her lips parted, as if she might say more. I leaned forward before I realized it, just slightly, the way you do when you're not sure if you're about to fall or be caught. Her breath caught. I heard it. Then she looked away fast. Pressed her palms against her knees like she needed to ground herself. "This isn't," she started, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than words. Streetlight buzzed. A car passed. Finally, she asked, not looking at me, "What do you think happens if we don't stop?" The question hung there, fragile and dangerous, the night holding its breath with us. She stopped showing up. Not all at once, but in pieces. First, she came later than usual, claiming work ran over. Then she skipped a morning. Then two. Soon the cafe felt emptier than it ever had, even when it was full. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. People get busy. Lives don't bend just to keep a routine intact. But when I passed her door one evening and saw the light on, the sound of dishes faint through the wall, I knew it wasn't busyness. It was choice. The next morning, her chair was empty again. I ordered coffee, sat down anyway. My phone buzzed once. A message. Not from her, from my ex. Another long paragraph I didn't open. I deleted it before the notification faded. The barista slid a mug toward me. "She hasn't been in," she said casually, like mentioning the weather. I nodded. "Yeah." My throat felt tight. That night, I finally knocked on her door. Twice. No answer. I could hear movement inside, though. The faint scrape of a chair against the floor. She was there. She just wasn't opening. I told myself to leave it alone. Respect the distance. But 2 days later, she appeared in the hallway as I was unlocking my own door. Coat in hand, hair pinned back, eyes avoiding mine. "You okay?" I asked. My voice cracked on the last word. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "I'm fine. I think maybe I should step back a little." "Step back? It's not fair," she said softly. "To you. To me. To—" Her voice trailed off. I caught the word son in the silence even if she didn't say it. I wanted to argue. To tell her I didn't care. That whatever this was, it mattered. But the words knotted in my chest. She brushed past before I could untangle them. That night I lay awake, phone glowing in my hand. I typed out, "I don't want distance. I want you." Then erased it. Typed, "I'll wait. Just say when." Erased that too. The draft box filled with ghosts of sentences I couldn't send. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next morning, I walked past the cafe. Didn't go in. Couldn't sit at that table, couldn't stare at the chair that might never hold her again. The scarf hung on the back of my chair at home. I thought about dropping it at her door. Thought about knocking, about waiting until she opened it. But I didn't. I just left it there. Folded neatly. Waiting like me. It was late when I heard her door open. The hallway was dark, only the faint hum of the elevator at the other end. I froze, keys in my hand, caught in the moment like I wasn't supposed to be there. She stepped out slowly, carrying a bag of trash, hair loose around her shoulders. When she saw me, she stopped too. For a second, either of us moved. "Hi," I said. Too soft. "Hi." She shifted the bag in her hand, then set it down by her feet like she suddenly couldn't carry it. We stood there in the narrow hall, the air stale with silence. Finally, she sighed. "You've been avoiding the cafe. You've been avoiding me," I said, and it sounded harsher than I meant. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. "I thought it was safer." "For who?" She didn't answer. Just leaned back against the wall, pressing her palms flat like she needed it to hold her up. "I don't want to be safe," I said before I could stop myself. The words felt raw, but they were the truest thing I'd spoken in weeks. Her breath caught. She rubbed her thumb against her palm, a nervous habit I hadn't seen before. "You're too young," she whispered. "I don't care. But I do." Her voice wavered. "Because I know what it looks like. Because I've already lived through one mess, and I can't drag someone else into another. Because I have a son who—" She stopped, pressing her lips together, fighting whatever else she almost said. I stepped closer. Not touching. Just close enough to feel the pull between us, the weight of what hadn't been said. "Then just tell me you don't want this," I said. "Tell me, and I'll stop." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were tired, yes, but also bright in a way I couldn't read. "That's the problem," she murmured. "I do want it." The words landed like a blow and a gift at once. My chest felt too full, my hands unsure of what to do. I wanted to reach for her, but I stayed still, afraid that any sudden move would break the fragile truth hanging in the air. For a long moment, we just breathed in the same space, the world narrowing to the hum of the building and the quiet between us. Finally, she stepped forward. Not much, just enough for her shoulder to brush mine. The faintest touch, but deliberate. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Okay," I whispered. She smiled then. Small. Almost reluctant. But real. And that was enough. Time passed without us noticing. Days bled into weeks. Weeks into a kind of rhythm that didn't need explanation. We still saw each other at the cafe sometimes, though not every day. The absence wasn't sharp anymore. Some mornings I came in late, sometimes she didn't come at all. But when she was there, her tea waiting, my coffee cooling too fast, it felt like the routine hadn't vanished, it had only shifted, like she once said life does. One Saturday, we ended up back on the bench in the park. It was colder now, the leaves brittle underfoot. She had her scarf wrapped snug, though I still kept the one she'd left behind months ago. It wasn't around my neck, It stayed folded in my jacket pocket, worn and soft, like a secret I could reach for whenever I needed reminding. We didn't talk about what we were. We never made declarations. But I noticed the way she'd lean in when I spoke, how she let the silence stretch without rushing to fill it. I noticed how her hand would sometimes rest on the space between us, close enough for me to touch if I wanted. And once I did. Lightly. She didn't pull away. Life didn't get simpler. She still had long days. I still got restless. There were mornings when I wondered if we'd slip apart again, if the weight of what we didn't say would press too heavy. But then I'd catch her looking at me across the table, eyes soft, lips curved just enough, and I'd know we were still choosing this. Choosing each other, in the smallest ways. One morning, 8:47 on the dot, I walked in to find she'd ordered for me without asking, black coffee, and, waiting beside it, a second cup of tea. Too sweet. I smiled anyway. You could learn, she said, echoing what she told me the first time. I sipped, made a face. She laughed. And for a moment, the cafe, the noise, the whole world faded into something that felt steady. Not perfect. Just steady. Later that evening, I stood with her at her doorstep. Same hallway, same dim light buzzing overhead. She shifted her keys in her hand, then glanced at me with that look, the one that had once stopped me in my tracks. You're quiet, she said. I usually am, I answered, and this time, it made both of us smile. I don't know if this is love the way people expect it. It's not fireworks or declarations. It's a scarf folded neatly. A bench we keep coming back to. A cup of tea I'll never quite like. But it's ours. And maybe that's enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?